Hey guys, sorry for the delay. It's been a little bit more than a week and a bit since I've gotten to do a video. Last week was a really rough week for me. I've had a bit of a screw up with my meds, and it really threw me for a loop for a few days. Um, but it gave me some good insight as to what people who are addicted or whose systems are used to having a very potent opioid in their system for a very long time. I had forgotten a couple of days to take one of my medications timed in the afternoon, and it threw off my sleep, and I was antsy and irritable. It's amazing what just a little bit of a offset from what your system or your body is normally and your mind is normally used to, how that can really throw you off. And then on a Thursday morning, when I was on my way to physio, I accidentally took my nighttime meds in the morning. So I went to physio kind of happy and kind of sleepy, but I got through it. Anyways, where I last left you was at the academy, I believe, and now we're going to talk a little bit about field training. So, field training typically with the WPS is a couple of months in a suburb division and a couple of months either downtown or in the North End. So, for me, back in 1998, I think it was about 2 or 2.5 months uh, per each posting, your first and second phase of field training. And my first phase was in the North End, District 3, now called North Division. And, it's one of those things, it's such a part of your career. You're just so junior and so new and so excited, but you're also super nervous because you're not in the classroom anymore. You're out on the street, and this is the real deal. And so, you want to do well. You don't want to fuck up. And there's so much more than just doing the job well. It's learning about the politics in a paramilitary organization. It's learning about the politics of shift dynamics, which is particular to each and every shift, is a little bit different one from the other. Um, the working styles of a cruiser car, attitudes, reputations, and this is where it really all begins for your career. You can get a little bit of reputation developed in the academy in terms of what your work ethic was like, your marks, how well you did, and that sort of thing. But really, your true measure comes as to what your attitude is like when you're out on the road and how you are as a new person. And back in 1998, recruits were still, it was still sort of a shut your fucking mouth, do as you're told, keep your head down, don't stand out, don't complain, don't bitch about anything, and do your job. I think things in that regard have changed considerably nowadays, but there was some value to that uh, work ethic back then, and things have definitely changed in terms of this. The majority of this generation's uh, coppers are, a little bit have a bit more of an attitude. They're a bit more self entitled, a bit more self expectant. Not everybody, for the most part. Um, but no longer do you just go in and do absolutely what you're told. I think that's very, very different nowadays. So, anyways, it's not like I'm trying to sound like the grumpy old dude and in saying that things were way better back then and that people coming onto the job should just be quiet and whatnot. But I think there was a much more of a respect for the chain of command, a respect for the senior guys, and there was just a knowledge of you just, you don't speak out against things right off the hop, and we were more careful about voicing our opinions, and we were slow to develop a confidence in terms of the shift dynamics in politics and all that sort of thing, instead of just sort of jumping right into it and automatically acting like you fit in. And again, it's not like that's the norm nowadays, but it's certainly a lot more common than it was many moons ago. So I got to work on my first day. I remember I was super nervous. I didn't live all that far from the station on Hartford, but I got there super early. But that gave me time to gather all my gear, make sure that everything fit right, get all the forms that I needed, that sort of thing, so that I was as prepared as possible for when we actually hit the road. And everything is just so fresh and brand new. Then you've never been to a shift briefing before. You sort of learn where you get to sit in the lunchroom, and what your place is in briefing, and you're just such a sponge. You're absorbing everything and excited nervousness. Um, and Before you hit the road. And I remember that I had two in District 3 anyway, two distinctly different field trainers. And those are really sort of the first people that you kind of get a sense of how to do things. So that'll really influence the development of your own personal style. And I had two field trainers that could have been more polar opposites. Both were pretty close to each other in terms of seniority, but one was a sort of very easygoing, quiet, laid back, um, don't wear your emotions on your sleeve, nothing ruffled his feathers kind of guy. It was pretty rare that I ever saw him miffed or mad with any of the assholes out on the street that we were dealing with. And then the other one was a lot more like my own natural personality. Um, wear your emotions on your sleeve. Things would get to you, and it would show in terms of your interactions with people. And but I really liked that person's style in terms of proactive policing. That person had experience in the Vice Division drug unit and was a very much street cop, hands-on, get in the corners and get dirty kind of guy. And yeah, that's in terms of a hockey style. And that suited my natural personality. And so through his style of field training, I had my eyes wide open to more than just answering calls for service, which is, of course, the bulk of what you do. But I learned a lot from both of them, and both had a positive influence in blending into my own personal development, and then how, when I started to get comfortable on the street in the first few years, how I started to do things, handle calls, and deal with people. But I'll talk about some of the events during field training that really that bother me to this day, and things that I um, think about, that get locked up in the hard drive and never go away. Um, but first of all was the exposure to the North End. Like, I grew up in South St. Vital and St. Boniface areas, went to school there, and I knew that there was a North End part of town, but all I knew of that were fun rides in the 72 Impala, um, going up over the Arlington Street Bridge, uh, merely as a diversion to get from point A to point B and have little fun, because it was quite something. I had no clue what things were actually like, and you don't get a good view of it at the academy Um, and the only way you can is to just experience it firsthand, trial by fire. And I got to see neighborhoods, homes, houses, back lanes that resembled something out of a third world country, war torn third world country. And it was just an absolute shock that this was in the city that I lived in. Um, and so that becomes the norm. That becomes, you get to see that ugliness, but even more so than that is the ugliness of what people can do to each other. And the types of calls that bothered me the most, of course, were things with kids, where children were involved, because I'd never really seen poverty at that level. And it's one thing when it's an adult, um, but when it affects kids, who either have no voice or can't use their voice, or they're afraid, well, that's stuff that anyone thinking about becoming a cop is you have to be ready to eat that. And one prime difficult example was one of the first scenes that I went to guard. Um, so myself and my field trainer were taking over a scene of infant death, and suspected homicide, and it was in what looked like a dilapidated old barn um, from the Depression, like a gray wood falling apart garage. Um, and I want to say from memory it was somewhere in the 700 block of Dufferin Avenue. And when we got there, we briefed with the night shift crew, and so we knew that a child had been assaulted and also killed in that garage, and we knew that a family member of that young person had been sexually assaulted, and um, details were such that they were screaming so hard that the person that was assaulting them smashed their fucking head into the cinder block. And there was physical evidence to that effect still when we took over guarding the scene. Um, and so that kind of stuff, those images never leave your mind. And, I'll talk about this more later on, but we all, at first, it didn't really affect me as much. But over the years, as the number of incidents and events like that pile up, um, the mental difficulty with them compounds. And while you can function, and I was able to function through my duties early then and later on, it still stays in the back of your mind and it affects you. And that's one of the fucked up things that this accident or this collision that I was in did. Um, when I was laying in bed, in the hospital in bed, uh, during the day or at night, looking up at the ceiling and counting the holes, whether I was asleep or awake, a lot of these horrible memories played back in my mind, um, like real short films, because that's what they were. Um, and so you have to that eats at you, but you have to eat it to deal with it and function. And again, I'll talk about how I developed good and bad coping mechanisms, or didn't even cope with some of the problems. I'll talk about that later on. Another event that I went to that I remember was in PD, or Point Douglas, which is a neighborhood in the North End. We went to a call where a woman was reporting that her social assistance check had been stolen. And when we got to the house, there's this. Well, I'll just put it frankly. That was my first experience with a cracked attic. I had never seen one before that. Um, so you know how you see how that affects the body physically, the mannerisms of someone um, addicted to that drug. Um, and so we got to the door, and this filthy old house. It was either on Lorne or Lusted, in the 100 block, and I can't remember which one. Um, but this woman is standing there. Her eyes aren't right. Her face isn't right. Um, and you can just tell that things do not compute upstairs. She's just filthy. She's not well dressed for answering the door. But worse off than that is the fact that she's holding a little baby with a fucking 10-pound diaper, who you can see that there's something. You can just see that there's something wrong with their face. It's not quite the same as someone who was born with fetal alcohol syndrome or FASD. Um, but in my experience or in my memory, um, the some of the characteristics of the face look the same. Um, 10-pound diaper, like I said, just dirty, filthy body. And as she's telling me the story that's completely nonsensical and just kind of going in circles about the fact that her check was stolen, but she couldn't say by whom or exactly when. Uh, Back then I probably wasn't getting that it was fucking bullshit. Uh, but it just, I know now. And that again, the house was just filthy. There were empty boxes of pizza and garbages turned over, and broken beer bottles all over the floor, and full ashtrays and cigarettes and all that stuff. And here's this poor little kid who's fucked for life and just born into a situation uh, that's unfair to them and that they can't do anything about. And what I remember most in terms of the mom, in terms of the physical mannerisms, was that her teeth would click as she was speaking to me, and that she would chew her nails and that kind of shit. And then I saw a second little baby, older than the one that she was holding, again with a 10-pound fucking diaper, and just dirty, filthy, and and then one of the things the woman was saying was that she was complaining how there's no food in the house for her kids, and that's why she needs to report her check so that she can get another one. Um, and I just thought to myself, well, there's broken fucking beer bottles there, and there's pizza boxes, but there's no, at least I didn't see any, uh, boxes or bottles of baby formula or clean diapers. And the older kid anyway was just seemed to be adept at navigating around broken beer bottles. And so that's uh, you see, I don't think those calls are as common now, but those are some of the things. Again, guys and gals, if you're thinking of doing this, remember that you're going to be seeing and putting up with shit like that for 20, 25, 30 years. And it's hard. You often also read about in the news or hear about um, police being the boogeyman and coming to take the kids away. Um, but of course, we're not the ones who take the children who are in those dirty, unfit situations in homes. We assist CFS, or Child and Family Services Agency, in the removal of those kids, because of course those environments are not safe for those kids. And that's what we did in that case, because that's what those kids needed. And a lot of what policing is temporary solutions. We respond to a situation like that We're met with a problem. We have to solve it uh, as efficiently as possible and appropriately. And of course, what we see is difficult. What we have to deal with is difficult. And the people don't like um, the solutions that we are forced to come up with and deal with. And, you know, of course, this is just one cop uh, and one house. You know, you think about there being 1,500 of us out there going to calls like that on a regular basis. And so you can guess what the numbers are, math wise, for how many times that happens. And of course, it's going to be, over the years, it's going to be in the tens of thousands for one area of the city alone. Um, um, but in time, you realize, you know, we have to act within our mandate. We're a law enforcement agency. We have to deal with the situations that we come upon, and quite often, part of the band-aid problem solving is finding a temporary solution through another social service agency, and that's a real that's a real big part of it. So, you know, it's just things that you have to be conscious of and that people need to hear and need to realize that that's what the reality of it is. And that's just field training. So we're just getting started, and I'm getting to about the 20-minute mark. So in order to continue to keep everybody's attention, I'm sure that I've got a whole lot more field training stories that I've got to get to, um, that I will, and we'll do that in the next episode. So again, sorry for the delay from last time, guys and gals, and we'll get back to you hopefully again in another week to pick up from where we left off. And always remember that to take good care of yourselves and take good care of your families. And your days off are more important than your working days. But work hard, be productive, and look after everything. Okay? Bye, guys.